Hello, everyone. Welcome to our panel on the current state of Web3 venture funding, venture capital in Africa. My name is Devon. I'm the founder of a company called Web3 Sanctuary. We are a next-gen edtech platform based here in Cape Town. And I've been in the space actually since about 2015, 2016. So I've kind of been around the market quite a little bit, but also with me on my panel is two impeccable people, both very aware of the VC space in Africa. And I'm actually going to hand over to both of them to introduce themselves. So to my immediate right, Gideon, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Yes, cool. Thanks, Devon. My name is Gideon Greaves. I'm the managing director at CVVC Africa. We're an asset manager and an advisory business focused on the Web3 and blockchain ecosystem. Our core focus is venture capital and ecosystem integration. We're a Swiss company, been around since 2016. We're in 5 different locations globally, and we have a dedicated fund focused on investing in startups that utilize blockchain technology in Africa. We have an accelerator, and we do direct investments as well, which we can chat a little bit about during the course of the panel.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gideon. So CV Labs and CVVC have actually been pivotal in growing the space here in South Africa. We are actually part of one of their portfolio companies in their previous batch. They have applications open at the moment for batch 6. So if there are any startups in the space that are interested in taking part in their accelerator program, I think applications close at the end of this month.
Yes, thanks for doing my job. I forgot about that. So applications close in November. We're going to extend it by another 2 weeks, because it looks like all the latecomers have been applying now, and there's been some really quality deal flow, so we're going to extend for the next 2 weeks. We will have selected the cohort by the end of January, and then the next accelerator starts in March with 1 week in Switzerland, and the rest of the program is done remotely.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Gideon. And then also sitting next to Gideon is Norbert, who's also had a prolific status in the space for a while. So I'll hand over to you, Norbert, to introduce yourself too.
Yeah, thanks, Devon. And it's always nice and interesting to meet Web3 folks and talk about happenings in the industry. As Devon said, my name is Norbert Amankwaa Adomako. I'm the communications lead at Metis. Metis is an Ethereum layer 2 scaling solution. We're actually among the very first few that launched in 2021. We celebrated our 2-year anniversary this week. And currently we are working on decentralizing the sequencer. Just so you know, almost all layer 2s are having centralized sequencers. We've had an internal testing that we are going to open up for community testing, hopefully this month or next month. And so, yeah, I'm also part and leader of the Metis Africa, which is a business chapter, more like a VC. And so we are more interested in nurturing and providing support for African startups. So this particular panel actually aligns with what we are doing. And I'm very interested in sharing what I know in the VC space.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And congratulations on all of your progress over the past few months.
Thank you.
So when we're talking about venture capital in Africa, I think stats are always important. And there's been a couple of reports released recently. Actually, I think there was the Standard Bank one, and then there was the Amankwaa one that was actually released more recently. So can you both tell me a little bit more actually about how much funding is really coming in to South Africa and to Africa from 21, 22, 23, and what are the kind of trends that we're actually seeing now?
Sure. Yes, so we wrote the African Blockchain Report in collaboration with Standard Bank, so it was the second report that we did. Some of the interesting data that we saw there, first of all, outside of blockchain, if we just look at Africa from a general venture capital perspective, of course, we've just been going through an economic downturn. When that ends is anyone's guess. Crypto-wise, hoping we're in the bull run now. But if you look at 2022, globally, startup funding was down 35%. Africa, startup funding was up 34%. In fact, we were the only continent or market that was up globally. So that speaks very positively about what's happening in the ecosystem and what's happening in Africa. Something to take note of is that we also come from a lower base, right? So it also makes statistics sometimes look a little bit more glamorous than they actually are. That being said, it's very obvious that there's a lot of international capital flowing into the continent, and it's an exciting time to be a tech startup founder on the continent. From a blockchain perspective, although the economic downturn was pretty significant, globally, startup funding into Web3 startups was up 4%. And in Africa, it was up an astounding 429%. And the time frame that I'm referring to is between 2021 and 2022. So I think there's a lot of excitement happening in Africa. Deal flow from a blockchain perspective is predominantly in Nigeria, deal flow-wise. But Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya are the three culprits. There's a lot of deal flow from Ghana as well. There should be a lot from Egypt, but unfortunately the regulatory environment there has really stifled the blockchain and Web3 ecosystem.
Yeah, so I mean, like Nigeria and South Africa as well. So like based on what Gideon has just mentioned now, what's your take? Who's leading of all of our African countries that are currently raising VC funding and looking into these markets? What's your take?
Yeah, I think Gideon gave such a good statistics about the inflow, looking at 2021, 2022, 2023. About 15% of all the tech funding that is coming to Africa is now channeled to blockchain. And when we are comparing South Africa to Nigeria, we could see that although Nigeria get the high deals, like the number of deals, many of them, we could see the South African funding much bigger in value as compared to what is happening in Nigeria. So deal-wise, I think Nigeria is getting the numbers, but South African value is on the rise. And looking at and comparing Africa to the global tech funding, we could see a rise about 429% compared to earlier on. And this is good, although general economic downtime was very, very significant, and it's still very, very significant. Although in blockchain, we could say that we are a little bit out of a bear market, and we only hope for a good future, hopefully first quarter or second quarter of 2024. So generally, we have seen significant growth in tech funding startups in terms of value compared to previous early years. Because I think about 1.8% of all global funding is coming to blockchain, and this is coming to Africa. And so African blockchain startups, I think, are in a good position to receive the funding. And although, as I said, the economic downtime is significant, we could see more progress going forward. And that is my hope. And so I always say that if we perceive the African future, we could see that in the next 70 years, global consumer percentage and population is going to raise very, very high. And if you take about 3 people in the world, at least 1 person will be an African. And so if you are building a product and it's not really geared to the African economy, then I'm not sure what you're doing. You need to focus on the African market, because it's like population-wise, we are on the rise. And so VCs should really monitor how the growth is going up within the African economy. And looking at blockchain is almost solving, serving as the infrastructure layer to solve almost all the problems that we are facing, from fintech to real estate, all problems that we could see that are facing African economies, blockchain can solve. And so this is a good advantage for VCs going forward, because we still need to increase it. 15% is still low, in my opinion, right? And so, looking at how the pitch was going, looking at how still funding is ongoing, I think startups are in a better position in the first quarter or the first half of 2024.
No, definitely. And there's a lot of opportunity for South African startups and for African startups in the market at the moment. But you've both spoken a lot about VC funding coming into Africa and coming into South Africa. But who are the VCs that we need to be paying attention to? Who are they? Where are they coming from? Where is this funding actually? Where do we need to start paying attention to?
I mean, the ecosystem is getting really, really busy from a venture capital landscape. 5 years ago, there was no such thing as venture capital in South Africa or Africa. So we're seeing a lot of local VCs popping up with mandates to cover the continent. The most active is by far, Launch Africa Ventures. Zach's been a legend in the space. Over 100 deals. So they've been significant. A lot of new funds have raised, north of $200 and $100 million recently, with Partech and Norskin and Founders Factory recently as well. So I think there's a lot of interest in the African market. All the LPs, predominantly the LPs that are investing in these funds are outside of the African space. So there's a lot of interest in the continent. But outside of Africa, most of the funding is coming from international VCs, right? So you're seeing the likes of, from the blockchain world, Coinbase Ventures and Paradigm, A16Z, Sequoia, in their tech funds and in their blockchain funds starting to deploy into the continent. That being said, they don't really understand the space. They don't have boots on the ground, and they're not fully mandated to focus exclusively on Africa. So on the back of that, they're investing predominantly in your validated growth rounds, Series A and above. And what that is effectively doing is it's leaving limited access to venture capital in that early stage environment. For VCs, that sort of presents a bit of an arbitrage opportunity, where if you focusing on the right founders, you essentially have the opportunity to invest in Series A caliber startups at seed valuations. But also, it's destroying the ecosystem in a sense where a lot of founders don't have access to capital, and they're battling to get from MVP to traction because they're just needing that little push. So there's more accelerators like CVVC as well that are launching on the ground that's pursuing that. But the market's changing drastically, and I think when the global macro market turns, I think there'll be a significant change in the outlook on Africa. The other big thing about the market to take note of is that traditionally there's been no liquidity in Africa. So everyone's got either the strategy to exit on the secondary market, or they're hoping that the market matures during the tenure of their fund. So, it's anyone's guess what happens. Every VC's got different strategies. But overall, the VC landscape is definitely maturing, and there's a lot more players focusing on the continent locally and internationally.
So from that, it does still sound that there's somewhat of a funding problem in South Africa, or in Africa actually, for startups on the ground here. So like 2 years ago, we were seeing a lot more funding, and I guess it's actually started to decline over the past few years. Is that actually true? Are we seeing a decline in funding? So I mean, like you've mentioned a couple of big VCs now, but what can we actually do to support the ecosystems here, and what should the startups be doing to turn that around if there is a problem, and what would that look like?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a funding problem, but I would say that because of the general economic downtime that we've had, that has really reduced the inflow of cash coming down in form of VC funding, right? And so I think going forward, one thing I would advise all builders to know that it's very good to have and build your unique portfolio, right? And so it's good to also build relationships with founders. I believe me as a VC, as a founder, I invest in people more than their products, right? Because once I trust you and there's this compatibility, and I could see that this person is ready to take feedback, that is when we deem it fit to give out funding to them, right? And so having this kind of genuine relationship where VCs could trust you and your product is the main goal for most of the VCs, right? And so I've talking to a lot of VCs, and one thing they look at is the money they are bringing it in, how are they going to get that back, right? And so you should present your growth, you should present your traction, you should present your unique value proposal. These are all very important. I've seen a lot of good builders, good people build great products, but they are not able to raise because of these factors. They have no traction, they have no kind of relationship with VCs and foundations. And so it goes a long way. You need to build all these if you want to really receive funding, because VCs need to trust you so that they can bring the cash to you.
It's so difficult as a startup to build relationships with VCs, to get that initial foot in the door. And you've spoken a lot of the most important thing is relationship building, right? To go for the traction, to go for the start. But if funding is a problem in Africa, what advice would you give to these startup founders when they're initially just kicking off their idea? What is the advice that you would give them to start reaching out to VCs, to funders, to start building those relationships and solidifying themselves within the ecosystem?
I just want to ask Gideon a question. Gideon, do I need to pay you to join CVVC Labs?
To join the accelerator?
I mean, yeah. Do I need to pay some
No,
fee?
of course not.
So you see, it's actually free to join these accelerators. And I've talked to Gideon over a year ago, and he's very welcoming. Just talk to people. That's how relationships are built, right? We've seen a lot of people here. Just talk to people, right? Relationship starts from conversations. You don't need to have a lot of money on you before joining an accelerator program. I've seen a lot of builders join boot camps, trying to bootstrap their way within the space before even meeting people at the top. And so you don't need money to actually join an accelerator. Just join. Just do it.
Yeah. So my thought there is two things. Number one, I think a lot of founders, also because of the ecosystem in Africa, from a venture capital perspective, isn't that mature yet. A lot of funders don't understand how venture capital works, right? So the one thing that I would say to startup founders is understand the VC model. Because early on in your journey, you have essentially two customers. The one is the customer that you're serving through your product or your service, which is very important, obviously. And the other one is essentially your investors. And you really need to understand that customer and understand how they work. You need to understand that a venture capital fund is a financial product, like a mutual fund, with investors that want returns at a certain amount of time. So we're not investing in small, let's say, quote-unquote, SMEs that are looking to grow slowly. We want guys that can raise capital really, really quickly, can go through a stage of hyper-growth, can get market traction. We want founders that elude that sort of confidence and also pitch the narrative that VCs can understand. So understanding the VC model is just going to help you penetrate the market a little bit better. And then the other one is just more of a human thing. We pitch to LPs as well, so we're doing the same thing on the VC side. We've also got a pitch, is to try and get as many personal touch points as you can. You go to a conference, you meet a VC, he likes you, he has the conversation, he or she likes you, and on the back of that, you can't expect to have a Zoom meeting next week and then you're going to unlock funding. Go find that person again, spend some budget on taking them out for drinks or coffee, and constantly pursue it. That persistence is admired by VCs because at the end of the day, they want you to be able to raise further capital. So if you can show that you're persisting with them, that shows that you're going to be able to persist with other VCs post your investment into their business.
Yeah, and I do think that understanding the VC model and understanding why VCs are investing in companies is important for startups. But as VCs and as funders, what is exciting for you guys at the moment in Africa? So what are the kind of trends and startups that catch your guys' eye that make you want to actually have that follow-on conversation or have that next discussion with founders that you maybe, let's say, for instance, meet somewhere at the conference today? Like if a startup founder came to pitch to you today, what idea would kind of catch your eye? What's trending? Yeah,
just before I come back to this particular question, you see, the problems Gideon addressed is kind of ideal in our system, right? So startup founders find it difficult to understand the VC model. And it's actually one of the products that we are currently working on just to help builders because they are great builders. I was in Kenya last year, and during one of our hackathons, we had a submission of 600 different projects, right? And so you could see the potential, right? So we are kind of working on something like builder or startup marketplace where we make it easy for these builders to reach out to VCs. Now, coming to the question you asked, so one thing that we are looking at, we are all investors, right? So we look at where the paradigm is shifting. We are in the blockchain world, and we saw the traction of metaverse, NFTs, DeFi back in the days. Right now, we could see the shift going to L1s, L2s, LSDs, like a whole lot. So these are what we look for because we look at where the money is moving out and where we could get back what we put in, right? And so not really chasing narratives, but chasing where the solution actually solves a problem. And one thing we could look at in African system is when it actually solves problems that we are facing. Yeah. And so if it's solving real-world problems like land systems, rentals, payment of bills, we still look at these, right? And if we take blockchain in general, although it's providing a lot of solutions, we could see that Africa is the main place where these blockchain solutions can be really deployed. And so although we are investors, we still look at the kind of problems that the solutions are providing, and then we take decision on that.
Devon, on my side, I would say, from an African perspective, being an early stage VC, you want to try and see that traction as much as possible. You want to try and de-risk the investment as much as possible, even if it just means that the traction is users or merchants, and that's all it is. Or it could be revenue, and your tech is actually a spreadsheet. Or it could be an exceptionally experienced team. for example, if Elon Musk, pitched to us, we wouldn't need to see his idea, right? That's enough for us to back him. And then the other thing, and this is obviously unique to early stage investors, it's different if you have a thesis focusing on high growth investment series A and above, it's just that feeling, that X factor feeling you get from founders when you can see that they're emotionally attached to the success of their business. It acts as an extension of themselves. They don't have side hustles. They're not all over the place. Like, this is everything to them. That's an investable person. And outside of that, you also want to understand, like, can this person raise capital? Can this person grow and motivate a team? There's all these other nuances outside of product market fit and the product and what you're trying to do. And I think that becomes almost the core element from early stage perspective. Because at the end of the day, most of the startups we invest in will end up pivoting or adjusting their model in some shape or form. So we want guys that can, pivot, persevere, hustle, and that's sort of, that element that we look for.
Perfect. Do I have time for one more question? Cool. So then I think to end off our panel, I want to flip it on its head a little bit and actually ask you guys, so for investors looking to invest in African startups or looking to invest in the African ecosystem, what strategies do you think that they should adopt to identify promising startups or promising ideas in this space? So for investors specifically, maybe international investors looking to get into Africa, what are the thoughts that you would, or the advice that you would give to them moving into this market?
Okay, so just one advice for them: they should calm down. They should understand our system. Because you can't sit somewhere and just throw cash here. It won't work. We've seen a lot of startups got funding from VCs in the West and East, and within a short time, they can't even generate any revenue. And so collaborating with local VCs or local personnel that understand the system and believe that this solution is actually viable in our setting should be the number one thing you consider as a VC.
100%. I agree. I think I won't name the name of these two startups, but from the Web3 space, there's two startups in Africa that have raised significant. There's multiple, but there's two I'm thinking of that have raised significant amounts of capital, pretty much based on a pitch deck, and it's mainly because of the charismatic CEOs that have access to the global ecosystem, and they've sold them the African dream. Execution's been really poor, and they've raised each of them in their own right over $25 million.
Wow.
So, coming to your point, Norbert. You need to be on the ground. You need to have boots on the ground. I can't believe how many international Web3 organizations I've met with where the head of Africa is based in Belgium or in France, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
So you've got to be on the ground. You have to understand the market.
Yeah, because it is different to the rest of the world. It really is. But I think that's all of our time for today. So thank you both so much for being on this panel. Thank you all for watching. And we will catch you at networking.